If you've ever looked at a potato sitting in your kitchen and wondered if it could become a real harvest instead of ending up in the trash, the answer is yes, but not always in the way most people think. A lot of people assume they can take almost any vegetable from the grocery store, put it in the ground, and expect it to grow into an endless food supply. It sounds simple, but the reality is a little different. Some vegetables are surprisingly generous. Others will disappoint you, no matter how carefully you treat them. So today, we're going to look at the vegetables people buy every week and see which ones are actually worth growing again. Not gardening myths, not internet shortcuts, just real grocery store vegetables. And what happens when you give them another chance? Let's start with one of the easiest: potatoes. Most gardeners don't start potatoes from seeds. They start from potatoes that have already begun to sprout. Those little eyes are not a defect. They are the plant getting ready for another life cycle. If a potato has several healthy sprouts, you can cut it into sections, making sure each piece has at least one strong eye. Let the cut surfaces dry for a day or two, then plant them. This is one of the reasons potatoes are so popular with beginners. They are forgiving, they grow vigorously, and they often produce far more than people expect. But there is one detail that catches a lot of first-time gardeners by surprise. Store potatoes are sometimes treated to slow down sprouting during storage. That means some will grow quickly, while others may sit in the soil and do almost nothing. If you've ever planted one and thought you did something wrong, you probably didn't. The potato itself may have been the limiting factor. The good news is that once you find a variety that performs well in your area, you can keep part of every harvest and plant it again the following season. One successful crop can become many future crops. Now let's move to something even simpler: green onions. This may be one of the easiest vegetables to regrow from kitchen scraps. Instead of throwing away the white root end, leave about an inch attached and place it in a shallow container with a little water. Within a few days, you'll usually see fresh green growth appearing from the center. Many people stop there and simply cut the new leaves whenever they need them. But there is a small improvement that experienced gardeners often make. Once the roots become active again, they move the onion into soil. The plant becomes stronger, the leaves become thicker, and you can continue harvesting much longer than you could by leaving it in water alone. Water is a good way to get started. Soil is what gives the plant a future. Regular bulb onions work a little differently. If you cut off the bottom root plate and leave a small amount of the onion attached, new shoots can emerge from the center. Over time, those shoots can separate into multiple plants. It is an interesting project, especially if you enjoy seeing how vegetables actually reproduce. But it is also important to know what to expect. You are not creating a machine that produces endless giant onions overnight. You are simply giving the plant another chance to complete its natural cycle. Sometimes that means new bulbs. Sometimes it means flowers and seeds. And sometimes it simply teaches us more about how the plant grows. That may not sound exciting at first, but it changes the way many people look at gardening. Instead of buying, using, and throwing away, we start noticing which parts of a plant still have life left in them. And once you begin noticing that, the next vegetables on this list become even more interesting. By now, we've already seen that some kitchen scraps have a lot more life left in them than most people realize. But the next few vegetables remind us of something important. Success is not always about getting a brand new plant. Sometimes it's about understanding what the plant is naturally designed to do. Let's start with ginger. If you've ever bought a piece of ginger with small green buds beginning to form, you've already seen the start of a new plant. Those buds are growing points. If the rhizome is healthy, they can develop into an entirely new harvest. The process is simple. Place the ginger with the buds facing upward. Cover it lightly with soil and keep the soil evenly moist. At first, growth can seem slow. That catches a lot of people off guard. But ginger is naturally a patient crop. Once it becomes established, it usually grows much more vigorously. A single healthy piece can eventually produce several new rhizomes, which makes it one of the more rewarding vegetables to regrow. Garlic works in a very similar way. Instead of planting the whole bulb, separate the cloves and plant them one at a time, with the pointed end facing upward. Each healthy clove has the potential to become a completely new bulb. It is one of the simplest ways to multiply a harvest. There is one thing worth keeping in mind. In many growing regions, garlic performs best when it is planted during the cooler part of the season. That does not mean you cannot experiment at other times. It simply helps explain why results can vary from one garden to another. Now let's look at celery. Cut off the base, place it in shallow water, and, after several days, fresh leaves usually begin growing from the center. At first, it almost feels effortless, but many gardeners eventually move the celery into soil instead of leaving it in water permanently. The roots continue to develop, the plant becomes stronger, and it has a much better chance of producing useful growth over a longer period. The same basic idea applies to cabbage and lettuce. Leave the base intact. Place it in a shallow container with water and watch the center. In many cases, fresh leaves begin to appear surprisingly quickly. This is also where expectations matter. Most people are not growing a full supermarket-sized head of lettuce or cabbage from a leftover stump. What they are doing is extending the life of the plant and getting additional fresh growth from something that would normally be thrown away. For many home gardeners, that alone makes the experiment worthwhile. It costs almost nothing. It is easy to try, and it changes the way we look at kitchen scraps. Instead of seeing waste, we start seeing growing material. And as interesting as these vegetables are, the next group may be the most misunderstood of all, because they do not always produce the results most people expect. The last group of vegetables shows why it helps to know what we are actually trying to grow. Carrot tops are one of the most common kitchen scraps people save. Place the top of the carrot in a shallow dish with a little water, and before long, fresh green leaves usually begin to appear. At first, it looks like the experiment is working perfectly, but there is one thing many beginners do not expect. The old carrot itself is not going to grow into a brand new full-sized carrot. The energy stored inside that root has already been used. What usually continues growing is the leafy top. For many gardeners, that is still useful. Some even allow the plant to continue its life cycle, produce flowers, and eventually provide seeds for future planting. Beets behave in much the same way. The top of the beet can produce fresh leaves after being placed in water or soil. Those greens are edible, and the plant can continue growing for some time. Just like carrots, the goal is not always to replace the original root. Sometimes the value comes from getting another useful harvest from something that would otherwise be discarded. Tomatoes work a little differently. Instead of planting part of the fruit itself, most people simply use the seeds inside. Place those seeds in soil, give them the right conditions, and they usually germinate very easily. That is one of the reasons tomatoes are so popular with home gardeners. There is one detail that is worth remembering. Some grocery store tomatoes are hybrid varieties. The seeds can still grow, but the next generation may not produce fruit exactly like the tomato you started with. That does not mean the experiment failed. It simply means the final result can vary. The last vegetable on the list is turmeric. Like hinger, it grows from a rhizome. If the piece is healthy and has active buds, it can continue growing after planting. It is not usually a fast process. Early growth can seem slow, but with enough time, the plant can develop into a productive harvest. After looking at all of these vegetables, one thing becomes clear. Not every grocery store vegetable is worth regrowing for the same reason. Some, like potatoes, onions, garlic, ginger, and turmeric, can become the beginning of future harvests. Others, like celery, lettuce, cabbage, carrots, and beets, are often more about extending the life of the plant and getting additional growth from something that would normally be thrown away. And tomatoes remind us that even when the process is simple, the final result may depend on the variety we started with. The biggest lesson may also be the simplest. A kitchen scrap is not always waste. Sometimes, it is the beginning of another growing season. And once we understand what each plant is actually capable of doing, it becomes much easier to decide which ones are worth saving which ones are worth planting, and which ones are best enjoyed exactly as they are.